Great.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to 12 Rules for Good Men with Dr. Jed Diamond. He's calling in from the gorgeous Willits, California. Sunshine abounds. It is June in California, so nice weather. So I would like to tell you a little bit about Dr. Jed Diamond so you get a feel for what you're about to hear here in the session. So Dr. Jed Diamond is the founder and director of the Men Alive. It's a health program that helps men and women, and the women who love them, to live fully, love deeply, and make a positive difference in the world. Dr. Diamond is one of the world's leading experts in the field of gender-specific medicine and men's health. He holds a PhD in international health and a master's degree in social work. He's the author of 16 books, including international bestsellers, Male Menopause, The Irritable Male Syndrome, and 12 Rules for Good Men. So I hope you will join me typing in the chat, welcoming Jed to the stage. We're happy to have him. So take it away, Jed. Thank you for being here.
Well, thank you, Lily. This is exciting to be here with you. I speak different conferences all over the world, and as Lily said, I've written a number of books, and this is a really special opportunity around Father's Day to really look at kind of the state of the world and men and our relationships to the world and to women. Really, this whole process began for me with the birth of my children. I have 5 children altogether. The first 2, my son Jamal and my daughter Angela, when they came into the world, Jamal in 1969 and Angela in 1972. And at the time, I made a promise to them that I would be a different kind of father than my father was able to be for me. My father left when I was 5 years old, and it's a long story about how that happened and the disconnection and the reconnection with him over the years. But I really wanted to both be a different kind of father and to change the state of the world that really excluded men from women, men from their families, and to really bring people together. And so what I want to talk to you about is 12 Rules for Good Men. It's both a book, which I've written, which I'll share a little bit with you, and also the topic of my discussion today. And I want to tell you, before I do that, a little bit about how the book came about. Now, I had written 15 previous books. Lily mentioned a number of them. And I thought, well, this would be a good time to end after 15 books. I had written a memoir actually about my father, and it was called My Distant Dad, Healing the Family Father Wound. And I thought, well, this is the end. 15 is a good number to end on. I thought my wife would be happy. I'm going to stop writing books and putting energy and have more time for family. But surprisingly, my wife Carlin said, "You've got to write at least one more book." With all the disconnection with men and women in the world, the kind of armoring that men in many ways are forced to wear in order to fit in with this kind of dominator society that unfortunately we still live in. Brianne Eisler will be talking about the shift from the dominator to partnership model later after I talk. But my wife said, "You've got to write another book." And I thought about it and I decided, yes, I did. And what she challenged me, she said, "You need to write a book that's both going to tell men more specifically what men need to do, and also to help women understand men better and understand really what is it about men that both causes problems and what is it about us that can be wonderful and glorious." So 12 rules. So let me just tell you the 12 rules. Let me get my glasses on here so I can give you the 12 rules, and then I want to talk about a number of them that I think would be particularly useful to hear today. So rule number 1, join a men's group. Rule number 2, break free from the man box. Number 3, accept the gift of maleness. Number 4, embrace your billion-year history of maleness. Rule number 5, recognize your fear and anger toward women. Rule number 6, learn the secrets of real, lasting love. Rule number 7, undergo meaningful rites of passage from youth to adulthood and from adulthood to superadulthood. Rule number 8, celebrate your true warrior spirit and learn why males duel and females duet. Rule number 9, understand and heal your adverse childhood experiences and male attachment disorders. Rule number 10, heal your father wound and become the father you were meant to be. Rule 11, treat the irritable male syndrome and male-type depression. And finally, rule number 12, find your mission in life and do your part to save humanity. So that's that's where we want to go. That's kind of the overview of all of the rules. I thought I would pick a few of them. We don't have a whole lot of time today, but hopefully you'll be interested enough perhaps to find the book and read the other rules if this resonates for you. But I wanted to start by sharing a little bit about rule number 1, join a men's group. Now, I need to say, first of all, to give you a little context for this, is my wife, Carlin, and I have been together and married now for 41 years. And Carlin attributes a lot of the success of our marriage to the fact that I've been in a men's group now that's been meeting for 42 years. And the men's group was something that I thought I would never have an interest in. But over time, I realized there was something missing in my life. Some of it had to do with my missing father. Some of it has to do with men have not had the opportunities to connect in a group situation, to talk about the deeper truths, the deeper feelings that we have. So my men's group has been meeting all of these years. We're actually going to be meeting again in another couple of weeks. And my teacher, mentor, colleague, and friend, Robert Bly, I think, summarized some of the essence and value of being part of a men's group. Now, Robert Bly is a poet, and in his poetic way, he said he felt that young men, boys, and I would say all men, need to be in the company of other men in order to hear the sound that male cells sing. I thought that's a wonderful, I mean, think about that there's a certain symphony that male cells sing when we're together. And likewise, there's a symphony of females when women are together. And it's important, I think, for men and women. My wife, by the way, is in a women's group, as I am in a men's group. And the group has really told us some deep things about who we are as men, and then what kind of relationships we can have with each other. So that's rule number 1. Second one I want to share with you is rule number 2. It's called breaking free from the man box. Now, the man box I think of as the restrictions, the things that we're told we have to do, and the things we're told that we're not supposed to do. And what's interesting in this, and I think it's helpful as we look at our relationships with men and women, is that in many ways, the things that men are told we must be are the very things that women are taught they must not be. So things like men are taught we must be powerful, we must be strong, we must be logical, we must be tough, we must be hairy, we must be rugged, are the very things women are told they must not be. And the other side is the things that men are taught we must not be are the very things that women often are taught they must be. Things like men must not be gentle, tender, soft, passive, sweet. And I think you can get this sense that part of the breaking free from the man box brings us into a new kind of relationship with ourselves that allows us to have a much deeper, broader relationship with the women in our lives, with our children, with our friends, that I think frees everybody. That's why when I first got connected with women's liberation, it was very clear to me that women's liberation and men's liberation were both together. None of us would become liberated unless we all were. So rule number 3, I call it accept the gift of maleness. And again, we can't really talk about maleness without talking about femaleness. So the first thing I did when I started doing research for the book was to inquire, well, how far back in evolutionary history were there males and females, different cellular beings? And it turns out it goes back 1 billion years to one cellular creatures that were first male and female. Before that, they were all female. And when they split into two, they were sister cells. But then there came a time when there was male cells and female cells. And now we go all the way through evolutionary history. And now we get to the point where there are now men and women, males and females. And it turns out that there are differences, significant differences between males and females that we need to accept, understand, and appreciate. And when my background is in biology, I was pre-med, I was in medical school for a time, and biologically, the way we define males are the creatures that have a large number of gametes, that is the sex cells, but they're very tiny. So think of a sperm, very tiny, a whole lot of them. Females, on the other hand, are the creatures that have small numbers of sex cells. Women have maybe 400 eggs that they produce in a lifetime, where men have billions of sperm. I think I wrote down the number here, huge number, 500 million sperm per day men produce. Another aspect of it, when you think of biological males and females, here's another truth that we've learned as we've gotten a much better understanding of the biology and the genetics of male and female, is that there are now known to be 10 trillion cells in the human body, 10 trillion cells. And here's the thing, every one of them is sex specific. Every cell in my body as a male has an X and a Y chromosome. Every female, pretty much, few exceptions, but mostly every female has 2 X chromosomes, an X and an X. And here's the thing, that X chromosomes turn out to be protective of all kinds of health risks. It's one of the reasons that women live longer, beyond some of the crazy things men do that get us in trouble. But what it says to me is that men need to accept our biological vulnerability. And as we accept, in a sense, our weakness, we also get in touch with our deep strengths and ability to be powerful in the world. from being able to be accepting of our limitations. That's hard for many men, as many of you know. It's hard to accept that we may have weakness. In many ways, I think the bravado and the having to prove ourselves often comes, from my experience, with men who feel weak, who don't feel manly. And so part of this whole process of the 12 rules is to help men and women get more deeply in touch with our deep sense of who we are. So I want to go on to rule number 5, which is to recognize our anger and fear towards women. I think one of the things that is a tragedy that I see every day in my clinical practice as a psychologist is the degree of anger and rage that is so present in many relationships and in the world. You know, when you think of the killings, the mass violence, what isn't often said is that most of the murders that we see, most of the serial killers, the large killings are male. And why is that? Well, I think some of it has to do with the reality of maleness, the fact that we all come from a woman's body. And in many ways, men who are insecure about ourselves build up a great deal of both resentment, of why do I have to be the one that goes after a female in order to mate and has to be chosen by the female in the same way that the sperm on a biological base gets chosen by the egg, which one she will admit to create the new life. And there was a book by a colleague that I first came to understand this. He's an anthropologist named David Gilmore. And he wrote a book called Misogyny, the Male Malady. Misogyny means hatred. And I think part of what we need to understand is this healing on a very deep level that needs to happen with men. It's why I think I found men's groups so important. It's a reason why healing a lot of the violence. I wrote a book called The Irritable Male Syndrome, Understanding and Managing the 4 Key Causes of Depression and Aggression, because I think healing male violence is critical if we're going to not only have good relationships between men and women, but to have strong relationships in the world and have a world that works. So rule number 8, if we're going to jump to rule number 8, I call it celebrate your true warrior spirit and learn why males duet or males duel and females duet. It's a nice thing, and I'll tell you how this came to be. But I want to explain first, when I talk about the male warrior spirit, I'm not talking about making more wars on other people. I use it in the way that the Tibetans, Chogyam Trungpa, wrote a book called Shambhala, The Sacred Path of the Warrior. And he said that warriorship here does not refer to making war on others. Aggression is the source of our problems, not the solution. Here, the word warrior is taken from the Tibetan pawa, which literally means one who is brave. Warriorship in this context is the tradition of human bravery, the tradition of fearlessness, not being afraid of who you are. So it's in that context that the warrior spirit, I think, needs to be transformed from the fighter, the killer, the soldier, to a peaceful warrior. And a woman researcher, her name's Joyce Benenson, wrote a book about this difference between the way males are and females. The book was called Warriors and Worriers. And the subtitle was The Survival of the Sexes. She offers, I think, a really interesting insight between men and women. She says, for thousands of years, human females and males have faced different sorts of major problems and found different types of solutions. Women have taken the primary responsibility for the long-term survival of vulnerable children. In contrast, around the world, men have taken primary responsibility for protection and defense, fighting wars. And so she says, this is an interesting kind of summary. She says, in essence, men are warriors and women are worriers. And I think that speaks a lot to women. They need to be warriors. They need to be the ones that are taking care of the children. And young children need the presence of, caretakers. And often it's the female that was the primary caretaker and had to worry about. I think of my wife, many women that I know who are so focused on health and getting to see your doctor and getting checked up. Males, on the other hand, I had a male friend that said, yeah, I go to get my yearly health checkup once every 10 years. And unfortunately, that's one of the reasons men live sicker and die sooner. And so I'm a very strong advocate, as you might imagine, in the importance of taking care of ourselves, seeing males as strength from recognizing our vulnerability, recognizing that we need to take care of ourselves better. And I think about this in terms of our present still crisis of healthcare with the coronavirus and the worldwide pandemic. And what we know from my research, in addition to the work I've done in gender medicine and men's health, I have a PhD in international health and studied pandemics and their effects. And what we've learned in the studies of the coronavirus is men not only seem to get sicker from contracting the virus, but they die sooner. And so the virus is not an equal opportunity killer. Not only does it impact men more than women, but obviously affects people of color, people in poor countries, people who don't have access to vaccines or are not able to get them. So I think part of this general healing that we need to do involves a healing of the discrepancies, the systems that discriminate against women in some ways, against poor people in ways, against people of color in ways. And I think part of the healing that goes on in conferences like these is healing on all these levels, healing with ourselves, healing with our relationships with each other, and healing our relationship to the planet. So rule number 10, heal your father wound and become the father you were meant to be. My own father wound was hidden for a long time. I didn't recognize that my absent father had impacted my life and my relationships. And in the book that I wrote, I wanted to grab a little quote from this because I think it captures. This is a quote by James Hollis. He's a psychologist. He says, "A father may be physically present, but absent in spirit. His absence may be literal through death, divorce, or dysfunction, but more often it is a symbolic absence through silence and the inability to transmit what he also may not have acquired." Another quote from Roland Warren, who works with fathers and children. He says, "Kids have a hole in their soul in the shape of their dad. And if a father is unwilling or unable to fill that role, it can leave a wound that is not easily healed." My distant dad. I've come to see that this is not just a problem with men, that women also have fathers that have been distant or absent, and that affects all our relationships. So the final rule that I'd like to share a little bit about is rule number 12, finding your mission in life and do your part to save humanity. clearly one of the things that the pandemic, I believe, is teaching us is that we're out of balance with the earth. Thomas Berry was a priest and geologian and historian of religions. And I like to offer this quote. He said eloquently about our state of the world and our relationship. He says, "We never knew enough, nor were we sufficiently intimate with all our cousins in the great family of the earth. Nor could we listen to the various creatures of the earth, each telling its own story. The time has now come, however, when we will listen or we will die." I think that's a powerful statement. My colleague and friend Rianne Eisler, who will be speaking after me this morning, really has done a tremendous amount of work over many, many years to recognize the way the dominator system causes an imbalance that is in its core destructive, as contrasted with the partnership system, which she so eloquently describes, and you'll hear more about with her talk. But I'd like to end my talk with a poem. And I want to tell you where I heard this poem. There was a workshop my wife and I attended a number of years ago with the mythologist and writer Michael Meade and the author Clarissa Pinkola Estes, who wrote a book, Women Who Run with the Wolves. And the conference was to bring men and women together, and it was titled Ovarios y Cojones, Ovaries and Balls. That gets right down to it. And in the course of the workshop and the conference, a lot of discussion and a lot of kind of intellectual discussions about the roles of men and women in a changing world. And towards the end, Clarissa, who nobody knew, wrote poetry. She wasn't known for poetry. I don't think anybody knew, and I haven't actually heard poems that she's written since, but she offered a poem that totally brought tears to my eyes at the time and moved me. And I've been sharing it. I think it's an appropriate ending for my talk today. It's called Father Earth. And when I just even heard the title, I felt a shiver go down my spine. Something different was being called on, something different than the traditional ways we looked at the world of Mother Earth. So I'd like to have you just sink into this poem, Father Earth by Clarissa Pinkola Estes. There is a 2 million-year-old man no one knows. They cut into his rivers. They peeled wide pieces of hide from his legs. They left scorch marks on his buttocks. He did not cry out. No matter what they did to him, he did not cry out. He held firm. Now he raises his stabbed hands and whispers, "We can heal him yet." We begin the rolls of gauze, the gut, the sutures, the grafts. Slowly, carefully, we turn his body face up. And underneath him, his lover, the old woman, is perfect and unmarked. He has laid upon his 2 million-year-old lover all this time, protecting her with his old back, with his old scarred back. And the soil beneath her is fertile and black with her tears. Father Earth, Clarissa Pinkola Estes. So what I leave you all with as you dive into the rest of this wonderful conference is an opportunity for new ways to perhaps understand males and females, men and women, this billion-year-old dance that we've all been doing, and what is going to be required of us to heal the wounds that we feel in our own hearts, the wounds we feel in our relationships with each other, and the wounds that we feel in the world. So thank you. It's been a pleasure to be with you. I hope our paths will cross sometime in the future. And until then, thank you for being with us. Take care.